Hello. Hello, fellow witches and wizards. My name is PhoenixGinny, and welcome to the stream. Welcome to Story Time Saturday number 25. Yes, continuing Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. We'll be reading chapters 13 and 14 today. I'm so excited. We're almost done. We are almost done. Over halfway. See that? Over halfway. Then we get to Chamber of Secrets. I mean, not Chamber of Secrets. Goblet of Fire. I'm sorry. I had a really long day at work. Oh my god, today was just crazy. If you couldn't tell by my haggard appearance. Also, I have a fan in front of me because it's freaking hot where I am. So, I have this nice little fan blowing on me. It's supposed to be quiet. I can barely hear it. I hope you guys can't hear anything. But as always, let me know if there's anything wrong with the sound or whatever. Hi, welcome. So glad you're here. Please, I would request that you would hit the like button if you haven't already. It really helps. Tells YouTube that you like the stream, and YouTube is more likely to share the stream with other people, so I can get more viewers, more people joining in on the fun. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. I would like to get to 50 subscribers very soon. And hit the bell icon next to it so you can be notified the next time I upload and the next time I go live. I will be going live probably next week, Friday and Saturday, as normal. But in case that changes, follow me on Twitter. Link in the description. That's where I give my streaming schedule every week. I will be streaming more Halo, and we'll be reading the next two chapters of Prisoner of Azkaban next Saturday. Probably, most likely. Most likely next Saturday is what I mean. And feel free to comment in the chat, join the discussion. If you're new, I don't just read the book. I also talk while I read. I make commentary on all my observations and things, so feel free to join the discussion. Also, if you're watching this and it's no longer live, still feel free to join the discussion in the comment section down below. I still read those. So also, I am still working on launching on my Patreon. I know I said I would launch it like 2 weeks ago, but I'm not done. This essay is just too good to just publish it as it is. I'm adding so much to it. I'm making it so much more worth your money. And I'm having a blast too. For those who don't know, I am preparing to launch a Patreon. First of all, I already have a Patreon. If you want to visit it, you can. It's PhoenixGinny. I mean, feel free to support me if you want to. There's nothing on there. But the plan is to publish monthly content for a subscription fee of $5 a month. But I'm not really advertising it quite yet. I mean, I'm talking about it, but I'm not really advertising it necessarily because there's nothing on there right now. There's nothing to buy. But I'm excited. I want to release a personal narrative that I wrote about being a teenager in the military, kind of looking at that life and this personal narrative that I wrote, and that'll be entirely free so that people can read it and know exactly what they're paying for, what my writing is like, see if they like it. But I am also working on currently a Harry Potter film analysis. Now, when I went to college, I took a special topics Harry Potter class, which that's a lot of the stuff that I talk about on stream. Is the stuff that I learned in that class. So for that class, I had to write an essay, and it could be about anything Harry Potter related that I wanted to. And since my final, I don't know, we called it a SIP, Senior Integration Paper or something. I don't forget what it was called. But at the end of your college course, as seniors, you have to write some big paper or do some big project or whatever for your major. Since I wrote mine, maybe I should publish that too at some point. I just thought of that. The essay I wrote was on fan fiction. I did my final senior project on fan fiction because my major was in English. So maybe I'll publish that. But since I already was doing one on fan fiction, I decided to write on the films. I decided to write an essay on a film analysis of each of the Harry Potter films, and I argued that they reflect the character and the essence of the books, even when they deviate from the books. And I talk about all kinds of controversial things. I wrote it in college, but it wasn't very good. I had to rush through it because I didn't have enough time to write as much as I wanted to. But now I have all the time in the world, more or less. So I'm adding all the things I wanted to add. I'm talking about all the things I wanted to talk about. So I'm going to be talking about all kinds of controversial things. I'm going to talk about why I think it's perfectly fine that Dumbledore gets mad at Harry and Goblet of Fire. I'm going to talk about how I understand why they burnt the burrow in Half-Blood Prince. I'm going to argue for that. Why Hermione's dress is a different color and why Harry's eyes aren't green. Okay, I don't talk about that one. But if you want to know about that one, you can watch one of my previous streams because I talk about it there. But I talk about a lot of things that the films do that are different that a lot of people really kind of argue about. And I'm just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Stop talking. Because I know a lot about these films. I know so much about these films. And it's not because I'm somebody special. I just love film, and I love studying film, and I love all the special... I've watched every single special features thing ever you can see about the Harry Potter films. So I know a lot about these films that a lot of people don't, because I take the time to do that sort of thing. I've also read through Film Wizardry. Not the updated version, though. I've only read the original. But there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I know of that a lot of people don't. And so I know the reasons why they deviated from the books. And it's not because, I don't know, they felt like it. There's legitimate reason for why they made the choices that they did. And I argue for them in this essay. So if you want to know all those things, if you're interested, stay tuned, because I will publish it, and you can become a Patreon subscriber, and you can get access to that. But if you are unsure, even then, if you want to become a subscriber, I will post here on one of my streams. I will read to you a section. See, this essay is 30 pages long already, and it's not even done. I just finished Half-Blood Prince, although I think I probably need to slap a conclusion on it. But it's basically 8 mini essays, because I wrote an individual essay for each film. So it's a lot. So I'm going to read one of those mini essays on one of my streams when it's done. Probably the Prisoner of Azkaban one, because that's the book we're reading currently. But I will be doing that. And then you can see if you want to read the rest of the essay and become a subscriber. And I'll post a video talking more about that down the road when it happens. Also, did I talk about this? I didn't live stream last week, so did I? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't remember things. As soon as a week is over, my memory dumps what happened, because I just don't have room in my head for that nonsense. So for Battle of Hogwarts Day, I did a Harry Potter marathon, which is what I do every year. But this year, I recorded myself watching the films. So I am working on editing it together, because I can't show the whole thing, because that would be violating copyright. But it does have my face, and I did shrink the film a little bit, so you're not quite seeing it the way you would normally see it. And I cut out some of the film, and it's my commentary over top of it, just like when I read the books. So I did that. And I'm going to be posting them soon, movie by movie. But I think I'm going to do something special with it. I will post the first one, and I'm going to see how it does. I'm going to see how great the reception is. And if the reception is exceptionally good, I might withhold Chamber of Secrets until I get 50 subscribers. Maybe I'll do that as leverage to get people to subscribe. But if it doesn't do so well, I don't know. I'll figure it out. I haven't really completely decided what I wanted to do, but just so you know, that is also in the works. So I'm very busy doing a lot of things, but the important thing is I'm doing things, because there was a time in my life when I didn't do things. So appreciate the times when I do things. Just ride that wave. Okay. All right. I said all the normal things, didn't I? Like, subscribe, comment, bell. I said all those things. All right. So let's get reading. All right. So, chapter 13, Gryffindor versus Ravenclaw. Also, like my shirt, I got it from that place that I went to in Florida, Universal Studios. You can't see it, but it says, well, I don't want to mess up my setup here. 1 second. It says Potter on the back. So neat. Saw a bunch of fans walking around with these shirts, and there's a shirt for every house and a different name on the back of all of them. And it's always the seeker's name of that team. So Potter for Gryffindor. The Ravenclaw one has Chang on the back. The Hufflepuff one has Diggory on the back. And of course the Slytherin one has Malfoy on the back. It's way cool. So reading the title just made me think of that. Alright. It looked like the end of Ron and Hermione's friendship, which happens every year. A big fight between Ron and Hermione happens like every year, I feel like. Each was so angry with the other that Harry couldn't see how they'd ever make up. Ron was enraged that Hermione had never taken Crookshanks' attempts to eat Scabbers seriously. Yeah, I'm kind of with Ron on that. She should have been more sympathetic and understanding. Yeah, no, I kind of agree with that. Hadn't bothered to keep a close enough watch on him, and was still trying to pretend that Crookshanks was innocent by suggesting that Ron look for Scabbers under all the boys' beds. Hermione. Come on, girl. Hermione, meanwhile, maintained fiercely that Ron had no proof that Crookshanks had eaten Scabbers, that the ginger hairs might have been there since Christmas, and that Ron had been prejudiced against her cat ever since Crookshanks had landed on Ron's head in the magical menagerie. Hermione becomes a lawyer later, so, like, I can't help but read that paragraph and go, she's making a case for Crookshanks in court. She's making all these, you know, the exact same things that the same exact cases that a lawyer would make for the defendant. I've been watching a lot of court TV like the rest of us. Like the rest of the country has been watching a lot of court TV lately. It's a dumpster fire I can't look away from. Personally, Harry was sure that Crookshanks had eaten Scabbers, and when he tried to point out to Hermione that the evidence all pointed that way, she lost her temper with Harry, too. Okay, side with Ron. I knew you would, she said shrilly. First the firebolt, now Scabbers. Everything's my fault, isn't it? Just leave me alone, Harry. I've got a lot of work to do. Hermione's not having the best year. She's having quite a tough time. Ron had taken the loss of his rat very hard indeed. Come on, Ron, you're always saying how boring Scabbers was, said Fred bracingly, and he'd been off colour for ages. He was wasting away. It was probably better for him to snuff it quickly. One swallow. He probably didn't feel a thing. Fred, said Ginny indignantly. All he did was eat and sleep, Ron. You said it yourself, said George. He bit Goyle for us once, Ron said miserably. Remember, Harry? Yeah, that's true, said Harry. His finest hour, said Fred, unable to keep a straight face. Let the scar on Goyle's fingers stand as a lasting tribute to his memory. That's probably the bravest, that's probably the best thing Peter Pettigrew's ever done in his life. Oh, jeez. Oh, come on, Ron. Get yourself down to Hogsmeade and buy a new rat. What's the point of moaning? In a last-ditch attempt to cheer Ron up, Harry persuaded him to come along to the Gryffindor team's final practice before the Ravenclaw match, so that he could have a ride on the Firebolt after they finished. This did seem to take Ron's mind off Scabbers for a moment. Great! Can I try and shoot a few goals on it? So they set off for the Quidditch field together. Is that foreshadowing? No, he's a keeper. Maybe not. Isn't it in Order of the Phoenix where he tries out for keeper, Ron? I think so. Yes, it would have... Yes, I think so. I mean, like, he tries out also in Half-Blood Prince. Doesn't he? I mean, yes, he does. But doesn't he... He also does... Wow. It's been a long time. It's been a long time since I've read Order of the Phoenix. But I swear I've read that one more times than I've read any of the other Harry Potter books, because Half-Blood Prince was the first book I had to wait for. All the other books, I didn't start reading the Harry Potter books until Goblet of Fire came out. And then by the time I was done with Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix just released. So, I don't know. That could be a reference to Order of the Phoenix, is what I'm trying to get at, in my Harry Potter pyramid that I like to refer to. I should just put it on the screen constantly. If I find a better example, I'll put it back on the screen. Madame Hooch, who was still overseeing Gryffindor practices to keep an eye on Harry, was just as impressed with the firebolt as everyone else had been. She took it in her hands before takeoff and gave them the benefit of her professional opinion. Look at the balance on it. If the Nimbus series has a fault, it's a slight list to the tail end. You often find they develop a drag after a few years. They've updated the handle, too, a bit slimmer than the clean sweeps. Reminds me of the old silver arrows. A pity they've stopped making them. I learned to fly on one, and a very fine old broom it was, too. She continued in this vein for some time, until Wood said, Madam Hooch, is it okay if Harry has the firebolt back? We need to practice. Oh, right. Here you are then, Potter, said Madam Hooch. I'll sit over here with Weasley. She and Ron left the field to sit in the stadium, and the Gryffindor team gathered around Wood for his final instructions for tomorrow's match. Harry, I've just found out who Ravenclaw is playing as Seeker. It's Cho Chang. She's a 4th year, and she's pretty good. I really hoped she wouldn't be fit. She'd have some problems with injuries. Wood scowled his displeasure that Cho Chang had made a full recovery, then said, on the other hand, she rides a Comet 260, which is going to look like a joke next to the firebolt. He gave Harry's broom a look of fervent admiration, then said, Okay, everyone, let's go. And at long last, Harry mounted his firebolt and kicked off from the ground. It was better than he'd ever dreamed. The firebolt turned with the slightest touch. It seemed to obey his thoughts rather than his grip. It sped across the field at such speed that the stadium turned into a green and gray blur. Harry turned it so sharply that Alicia Spinnet screamed. Then he went into a perfectly controlled dive, brushing the grassy field with his toes before rising 30, 40, 50 feet into the air again. Harry, I'm letting the snitch out, Wood called. Harry turned and raced a bludger toward the goalposts. He outstripped it easily, saw the snitch dart out from behind Wood, and within 10 seconds had caught it tightly in his hand. The team cheered madly. Harry let the snitch go again, gave it a minute's head start, then tore after it, waving in and out the others. He spotted it lurking near Katie Bell's knee, looped her easily, and caught it again. It was the best practice ever. The team, inspired by the presence of the firebolt in their midst, performed their best moves faultlessly, and by the time they hit the ground again, Wood didn't have a single criticism to make, which, as George Weasley pointed out, was a first. I can't see what's going to stop us tomorrow, said Wood. Not unless... Harry, you've sorted out your Dementor problem, haven't you? Yeah, said Harry, thinking of his feeble Patronus and wishing it were stronger. The Dementors won't turn up again, Oliver. Dumbledore will go ballistic, said Fred confidently. Well, let's hope not, said Wood. Anyway, good work, everyone. Let's get back to the tower. Turn in early. I'm staying out for a bit. Ron wants to go on the firebolt, Harry told Wood, and while the rest of the team headed off to the locker rooms, Harry strolled over to Ron, who vaulted the barrier to the stands and came to meet him. Madame Hooch had fallen asleep in her seat. Here you go, said Harry, handing Ron the firebolt. Ron, an expression of ecstasy on his face, mounted the broom and zoomed off into the gathering darkness, while Harry walked around the edge of the field, watching him. Night had fallen before Madame Hooch awoke with a start, told Harry to run off for not waking her, and insisted that they go back to the castle. Harry shouldered the firebolt, and he and Ron walked out of the shadowy stadium, discussing the firebolt's superbly smooth action, its phenomenal acceleration, and its pinpoint turning. They were halfway toward the castle when Harry, glancing to his left, saw something that made his heart turn over, a pair of eyes gleaming out of the darkness. Harry stopped dead, his heart banging against his ribs. "What's the matter?" said Ron. Harry pointed. Ron pulled out his wand and muttered, "Lumos." A beam of light fell across the grass, hit the bottom of a tree, and illuminated its branches. There, crouching among the budding leaves, was Crookshanks. I forgot about this. I feel like I always forget about this part. I still don't remember ever reading this. But that's what's going on here in the picture. As they see Crookshanks. Weird. "Get out of here," Ron roared, and he stooped down and seized a stone lying on the grass. But before he could do anything else, Crookshanks had vanished with one swish of his long ginger tail. "See?" Ron said furiously, chucking the stone down again. "She's still letting him wander about wherever he wants. Probably washing down scabbers with a couple of birds now." Harry didn't say anything. He took a deep breath as relief seeped through him. He had been sure for a moment that those eyes had belonged to the Grim. They set off for the castle once more. Slightly ashamed of his moment of panic, Harry didn't say anything to Ron, nor did he look left or right until they had reached the well-lit entrance hall. Harry went down to breakfast the next morning with the rest of the boys in his dormitory, all of whom seemed to think the firebolt deserved a sort of guard of honor. As Harry entered the great hall, heads turned in the direction of the firebolt, and there was a great deal of excited muttering. Harry saw, with enormous satisfaction, that the Slytherin team were all looking thunderstruck. "Did you see his face?" said Ron gleefully, looking back at Malfoy. "He can't believe it. This is brilliant." Wood, too, was basking in the reflected glory of the firebolt. "Put it here, Harry," he said, laying the broom in the middle of the table and carefully turning it so its name faced upward. People from the Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff tables were soon coming over to look. Cedric Diggory came over to congratulate Harry on having acquired such a superb replacement for his Nimbus, and Percy's Ravenclaw girlfriend, Penelope Clearwater, asked if she could actually hold the firebolt. I know that Percy's Gryffindor. I know that Percy's girlfriend is Ravenclaw, but the way that's said makes it sound like he has a girlfriend in every house. This is his Ravenclaw girlfriend, and here's his Hufflepuff girlfriend and his Gryffindor girlfriend. That's what it sounds like. I don't think I would have written it that way. Now, Penny, no sabotage," said Percy heartily as she examined the firebolt closely. "Penelope and I have got a bet on," he told the team, 10 galleons on the outcome of the match. Penelope put the firebolt down again, thanked Harry, and went back to her table. "Harry, make sure you win," said Percy in an urgent whisper. "I haven't got 10 galleons. "Yes, I'm coming, Penny," and he bustled off to join her in a piece of toast. I'm gonna get more comfortable. Okay. "Sure you can manage that broom, Potter?" said a cold, drawling voice. Draco Malfoy had arrived for a closer look, Crabbe and Goyle right behind him. "Yeah, reckon so," said Harry casually. "Got plenty of special features, hasn't it?" said Malfoy, eyes glittering maliciously. "Shame it doesn't come with a parachute, in case you get too near a Dementor." Crabbe and Goyle snickered. Pity you can't attach an extra arm to yours, Malfoy, said Harry. Then it could catch the snitch for you. The Gryffindor team laughed loudly. Malfoy's pale eyes narrowed, and he stalked away. They watched him rejoin the rest of the Slytherin team, who put their heads together, no doubt asking Malfoy whether Harry's broom really was a firebolt. At 11:15, the Gryffindor team set off for the locker rooms. The weather couldn't have been more different from their match against Hufflepuff. It was a clear, cool day with a very light breeze. There would be no visibility problems this time, and Harry, though nervous, was starting to feel the excitement only a Quidditch match could bring. They could hear the rest of the school moving into the stadium beyond. Harry took off his black school robes, removed his wand from his pocket, and stuck it inside the t-shirt he was going to wear under his Quidditch robes. He only hoped he wouldn't need it. He wondered suddenly whether Professor Lupin was in the crowd, watching. "You know what we've got to do," said Wood as they prepared to leave the locker rooms. "If we lose this match, we're out of the running. Just fly like you did in practice yesterday, and we'll be okay." They walked out onto the field to tumultuous applause. The Ravenclaw team, dressed in blue, were already standing in the middle of the field. Their seeker, Cho Chang, was the only girl on their team. She was shorter than Harry by about a foot, and Harry couldn't help noticing, nervous as he was, that she was extremely pretty. Well, well, well. Wellity, wellity, wellity. She smiled at Harry as the teams faced each other behind their captains, and he felt a slight lurch in the region of his stomach that he didn't think had anything to do with nerves. Oh, I didn't mention that in my essay. I probably should have. It's probably not necessary. Wood, Davies, shake hands, Madam Hooch said briskly, and Wood shook hands with the Ravenclaw captain. "Mount your brooms. On my whistle. 3, 2, 1. Harry kicked off into the air, and the firebolt zoomed higher and faster than any other broom. He soared around the stadium and began squinting around for the snitch, listening all the while to the commentary, which was being provided by the Weasley twins' friend, Lee Jordan. "They're off, and the big excitement this match is the firebolt that Harry Potter is flying for Gryffindor. According to which broomstick, the firebolt's going to be the broom of choice for the national teams at this year's World Championship. Jordan, would you mind telling us what's going on in the match?" interrupted Professor McGonagall's voice. "Right you are, Professor. Just giving a bit of background information. The firebolt, incidentally, has a built-in auto-brake and... Jordan! Okay. Gryffindor in possession. Katie Bell of Gryffindor heading for goal." Harry streaked past Katie in the opposite direction, gazing around for a glint of gold and noticing that Cho Chang was tailing him closely. She was undoubtedly a very good flyer. She kept cutting across him, forcing him to change direction. "Show her your acceleration, Harry," Fred yelled as he whooshed. The word whooshed is funny. Like, it looks like wooshed. As he whooshed past in pursuit of a bludger. And bludger's capitalized. Was it capitalized earlier? Because I'm only just now noticing that. That was aiming for Alicia. Harry urged the firebolt forward as they rounded the Ravenclaw goalposts, and Cho fell behind. Just as Katie succeeded in scoring the first goal of the match and the Gryffindor end of the field went wild, he saw it. The snitch was close to the ground, flitting near one of the barriers. Harry dived. Cho saw what he was doing and tore after him. Harry was speeding up, excitement flooding him. Dives were his specialty. He was 10 feet away. Dives were his specialty, huh? I didn't know that. Then a bludger, hit by one of the Ravenclaw beaters, came pelting out of nowhere. Harry veered off course, avoiding it by an inch, and in those few crucial seconds the snitch had vanished. There was a great ooh of disappointment from the Gryffindor supporters, but much applause for their beater from the Ravenclaw end. George Weasley vented his feelings by hitting the second bludger directly at the offending beater, who was forced to roll right over in midair to avoid it. Gryffindor leads by 80 points to 0, and look at that firebolt go! Potter's really putting it through its paces now. See it turn. Chang's comet is just no match for it. The firebolt's precision, balance is really noticeable in these long... Jordan, are you being paid to advertise firebolts? Get on with the commentary. Ravenclaw was pulling back. They had now scored 3 goals, which put Gryffindor only 50 points ahead. If Cho got the snitch before him, Ravenclaw would win. Harry dropped lower, narrowly avoiding a Ravenclaw chaser, scanning the field frantically. A glint of gold, a flutter of tiny wings. The snitch was circling the Gryffindor goalpost. Harry accelerated, eyes fixed on the speck of gold ahead. But just then, Cho appeared out of thin air, blocking him. "Harry, this is no time to be a gentleman!" Wood roared as Harry swerved to avoid a collision. "Knock her off her broom if you have to!" Harry turned and caught sight of Cho. She was grinning. The snitch had vanished again. Harry turned his firebolt upward and was soon 20 feet above the game. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Cho following him. She decided to mark him rather than search for the snitch herself. All right, then. If she wanted to tail him, she'd have to take the consequences. He dived again, and Cho, thinking he'd seen the snitch, tried to follow. Harry pulled out of the dive very sharply. She hurtled downward. He rose fast as a bullet once more, and then saw it for the 3rd time. The snitch was glittering way above the field at the Ravenclaw end. He accelerated. So many feet below did Cho. He was winning, gaining on the snitch with every second. Then... "Oh!" screamed Cho, pointing. Distracted, Harry looked down. It's thundering outside. It's gonna rain soon. 3 Dementors, 3 tall, black, hooded Dementors were looking up at him. He didn't stop to think. Plunging a hand down the neck of his robes, he whipped out his wand and roared, "Expecto Patronum!" Something silver-white, something enormous, erupted from the end of his wand. He knew it had shot directly at the Dementors, but didn't pause to watch. His mind still miraculously clear, he looked ahead. He was nearly there. He stretched out the hand still grasping his wand and just managed to close his fingers over the small, struggling snitch. Madame Hooch's whistle sounded. Harry turned around in midair and saw 6 scarlet blurs bearing down on him. Next moment, the whole team was hugging him so hard he was nearly pulled off his broom. Down below, he could hear the roars of the Gryffindors in the crowd. "That's my boy!" Wood kept yelling. Alicia, Angelina, and Katie had all kissed Harry. Fred had him in a grip so tight Harry felt as though his head would come off. Ooh, can you hear that thunder? In complete disarray, the team managed to make its way back to the ground. Harry got off his broom and looked up to see a gaggle of Gryffindor supporters sprinting onto the field, Ron in the lead. Before he knew it, he had been engulfed by the cheering crowd. "Yes!" Ron yelled, yanking Harry's arm in the air. "Yes! Yes!" "Well done, Harry," said Percy, looking delighted. 10 gallons to me. Must find Penelope. Excuse me. "Good for you, Harry," roared Seamus Finnegan. "Ruddy brilliant," boomed Hagrid over the heads of the milling Gryffindors. "That was quite some Patronus," said a voice in Harry's ear. Harry turned around to see Professor Lupin, who looked both shaken and pleased. "The Dementors didn't affect me at all," Harry said excitedly. "I didn't feel a thing." "That would be because they, weren't Dementors," said Professor Lupin. "Come and see." He led Harry out of the crowd until they were able to see the edge of the field. "It gave Mr. Malfoy quite a fright," said Lupin. Harry stared. Lying in a crumpled heap on the ground were Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, and Marcus Flint, the Slytherin team captain, all struggling to remove themselves from long, black, hooded robes. It looked as though Malfoy had been standing on Goyle's shoulders. Standing over them was with an expression of the utmost fury on her face, was Professor McGonagall. "An unworthy trick," she was shouting. "A low and cowardly attempt to sabotage the Gryffindor Seeker. Detention for all of you, and 50 points from Slytherin. I shall be speaking to Professor Dumbledore about this. Make no mistake. Ah, here he comes now." If anything could have set the seal on Gryffindor's victory, it was this. Ron, who had fought his way through to Harry's side, doubled up with laughter as they watched Malfoy fighting to extricate himself from the robe, Goyle's head still stuck inside it. Come on, Harry, said George, fighting his way over. Party! Gryffindor common room now. Right, said Harry, and feeling happier than he had in ages, he and the rest of the team led the way, still in their scarlet robes, out of the stadium and back up to the castle. It felt as though they had already won the Quidditch Cup. The party went on all day and went into the night. Fred and George Weasley disappeared for a couple of hours and returned with armfuls of bottles of butterbeer, pumpkin fizz, and several bags full of Honeyduke's sweets. How did you do that? Squealed Angelina Johnson as George started throwing peppermint toads into the crowd. With a little help from Moony, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs, Fred muttered in Harry's ear. Only one person wasn't joining in the festivities. Hermione, incredibly, was sitting in a corner attempting to read an enormous book entitled Home Life and Social Habits of British Muggles. Harry broke away from the table where Fred and George had started juggling butterbeer bottles and went over to her. Did you even come to the match? He asked her. Of course I did, said Hermione in a strangely high-pitched voice, not looking up. And I'm very glad we won, and I think you did really well, but I need to read this by Monday. Come on, Hermione. Ooh, hear that wind. Come on, Hermione, come and have some food, Harry said, looking over at Ron and wondering whether he was in a good enough mood to bury the hatchet. I can't, Harry. I've still got 422 pages to read, said Hermione, now sounding slightly hysterical. Anyway, she glanced over at Ron, too. He doesn't want me to join in. There was no arguing with this, as Ron chose that moment to say loudly, if Scabbers hadn't just been eaten, he could have had some of these fudge flies. He used to really like them. Okay, Ron. Okay, we get it. You're upset. I don't think that was necessary. Hermione burst into tears. Before Harry could say or do anything, she tucked the enormous book under her arm, and still sobbing, ran toward the staircase to the girls' dormitories and out of sight. Can't you give her a break? Harry asked Ron quietly. Oh, man. It is wicked outside. I hope the stream doesn't cut out. I hope my internet doesn't go, or the electricity. Do you hear that? It's so nice. I love the rain. Oh man, that's beautiful. That's like real heavy rain. Sorry. No, said Ron flatly. If she just acted like she was sorry. But she'll never admit she's wrong, Hermione. She's still acting like Scabbers has gone on vacation or something. The Gryffindor party ended only when Professor McGonagall turned up in her tartan dressing gown and hairnet at 1 in the morning to insist that they all go to bed. Harry and Ron climbed the stairs to their dormitory, still discussing the match. At last, exhausted, Harry climbed into bed, twitched. The hangings of his four-poster shut, twitched. I've never heard that word used in this context before. Twitched the hangings of his four-poster shut to block out a ray of moonlight, lay back, and felt himself almost instantly drifting off to sleep. He had a very strange dream. He was walking through a forest, his firebolt over his shoulder, following something silvery white. It was winding its way through the trees ahead, and he could only catch glimpses of it between the leaves. Anxious to catch up with it, he sped up, but as he moved faster, so did his quarry. Harry broke into a run, and ahead he heard hooves gathering speed. Now he was running flat out, and ahead he could hear galloping. Then he turned a corner into a clearing, and... Ah! No! That almost sounds like he's following... That almost sounds like the Silver Doe. I mean, it's not. It's a reference to his father and his own Patronus, but that makes me think of the Silver Doe, though. Harry woke as suddenly as though he'd been hit in the face. Disoriented in the total darkness, he fumbled with his hangings. He could hear movements around him and Seamus Finnegan's voice from the other side of the room. "What's going on?" Harry thought he heard the dormitory door slam. At last, finding the divide in his curtains, he ripped them back, and at the same moment, Dean Thomas lit his lamp. Ron was sitting up in bed, the hangings torn from one side, and look of utmost terror on his face. "Black! Sirius Black! With a knife!" "What?" "Here! Just now! Slashed the curtains! Woke me up!" "You sure you weren't dreaming, Ron?" said Dean. "Look at the curtains! I tell you, he was here!" They all scrambled out of bed. Harry reached the dormitory door first, and they sprinted back down the staircase. Doors opened behind them, and sleepy voices called after them. Who shouted? "What are you doing?" The common room was lit with the glow of the dying fire, still littered with the debris from the party. It was deserted. "You sure you weren't dreaming, Ron? I'm telling you, I saw him." "What's all the noise?" "Professor McGonagall told us to go to bed." A few of the girls had come down their staircase, pulling on dressing gowns and yawning. Boys, too, were reappearing. "Excellent. Are we carrying on?" said Fred Weasley brightly. "Everyone back upstairs," said Percy, hurrying into the common room and pinning his head boy badge to his pajamas as he spoke. Sirius Black," said Ron faintly, "in our dormitory, with a knife. Woke me up." The common room went very silent. "Nonsense," said Percy, looking startled. "You had too much to eat, Ron. Had a nightmare. I'm telling you, now really, enough's enough." Professor McGonagall was back. She slammed the portrait behind her as she entered the common room and stared furiously around. "I am delighted that Gryffindor won the match, but this is getting ridiculous. Percy, I expected better of you." "I certainly didn't authorize this, Professor," said Percy, puffing himself up indignantly. "I was just telling them all to get back to bed. My brother Ron here had a nightmare." "It wasn't a nightmare!" Ron yelled. "Professor, I woke up and Sirius Black was standing over me, holding a knife." Professor McGonagall stared at him. "Don't be ridiculous, Weasley. How could he possibly have gotten through the portrait hole?" "Ask him," said Ron, pointing a shaking finger at the back of Sir Cadogan's picture. "Ask him if he saw." Glaring suspiciously at Ron, Professor McGonagall pushed the portrait back open and went outside. The whole common room listened with bated breath. "Sir Cadogan, did you just let a man into Gryffindor Tower?" "Certainly, good lady," cried Sir Cadogan. There was a stunned silence, both inside and outside the common room. You did?" said Professor McGonagall. But the password." "He had 'em," said Sir Cadogan proudly. "Had the whole week's, my lady. Read 'em off a little piece of paper." Professor McGonagall pulled herself back through the portrait hole to face the stunned crowd. She was white as chalk. "Which person," she said, her voice shaking, "which abysmally foolish person wrote down this week's passwords and left them lying around?" There was utter silence, broken by the smallest of terrified squeaks. Neville Longbottom, trembling from head to fluffy slippered toes, raised his hand slowly into the air. Yikes. Oh, poor Neville. But that is the end of chapter 13. And next we will read chapter 14, Snape's Grudge. Ooh, this one's a good one. Okay. But I will be taking a 15-minute break first. So now is a good time to smash that like button if you haven't already. And if you're not subscribed, become a subscriber and make sure that you have notifications turned on so you can be notified the next time I upload or the next time I go live. I will be going live probably next Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But if you want to know my stream schedule, follow me on Twitter. Link in the description. And feel free to chat in the comments or in the chat if you're watching this live or if you're not watching this live. But now's a good time to get up and stretch, get a snack, get a drink, use the restroom, do what you have to do, and I'll be back in 15 minutes. Welcome back. Now let's get started on reading chapter 14, Snape's Grudge. Chapter 14. Snape's Grudge. No one in Gryffindor Tower slept that night. They knew that the castle was being searched again, and the whole house stayed awake in the common room, waiting to hear whether Black had been caught. Professor McGonagall came back at dawn to tell them that he had again escaped. Throughout the day, everywhere they went, they saw signs of tighter security. Professor Flitwick could be seen teaching the front doors to recognize a large picture of Sirius Black. Filch was suddenly bustling up and down the corridors, boarding up everything from tiny cracks in the walls to mouse holes. Sir Cadogan had been fired. Oh, ouch. His portrait had been taken back to its lonely landing on the 7th floor, and the fat lady was back. She had been expertly restored, but was still extremely nervous, and had agreed to return to her job only on condition that she was given extra protection. A bunch of surly security trolls had been hired to guard her. They paced the corridor in a menacing group, talking in grunts and comparing the size of their clubs. I thought trolls are supposed to be dangerous. Now all of a sudden they're keeping watch in a corridor? I don't know. Harry couldn't help noticing that the statue of the one-eyed witch on the 3rd floor remained unguarded and unblocked. It seemed that Fred and George had been right in thinking that they, and now Harry, Ron, and Hermione, were the only ones who knew about the hidden passageway within it. "Do you reckon we should tell someone?" Harry asked Ron. "We know he's not coming in through Honeydukes," said Ron dismissively. We'd have heard if the shop had been broken into." Harry was glad Ron took this view. If the one-eyed witch was boarded up too, he would never be able to go into Hogsmeade again. Ron had become an instant celebrity. For the first time in his life, people were paying more attention to him than to Harry, and it was clear that Ron was rather enjoying the experience. Though still severely shaken by the night's events, he was happy to tell anyone who asked what had happened, with a wealth of detail. "I was asleep, and I heard this ripping noise, and I thought it was in my dream, But then there was this draft. I woke up, and one side of the hangings on my bed had been pulled down. I rolled over, and I saw him standing over me, like a skeleton with loads of filthy hair, holding this great long knife, must have been 12 inches. And he looked at me, and I looked at him, and then I yelled, and he scampered." "Why, though?" Ron added to Harry as the group of second-year girls who had been listening to his chilling tale departed. Why did he run? Harry had been wondering the same thing. Why had Black, having got the wrong bed, not silenced Ron and proceeded to Harry? Black had proved 12 years ago that he didn't mind murdering innocent people, and this time he had been facing 5 unarmed boys, 4 of whom were asleep. Yes, good point. "He must have known he'd have a job getting back out of the castle once you've yelled and woken people up," said Harry thoughtfully. He'd have to kill the whole house to get back through the porthole. Then he would have met the teachers. Neville was in total disgrace. Professor McGonagall was so furious with him that she had banned him from all future Hogsmeade visits, given him a detention, and forbidden anyone to give him the password into the tower. That is so awful. That's so sad. Oh my goodness. Poor Neville was forced to wait outside the common room every night for somebody to let him in, while the security trolls leered unpleasantly at him. None of these punishments, however, came close to matching the one his grandmother had in store for him. 2 days after Black's break-in, she sent Neville the very worst thing a Hogwarts student could receive over breakfast: a howler. This is so sad. The school owl swooped into the great hall, carrying the mail as usual, and Neville choked as a huge barn owl landed in front of him, a scarlet envelope clutched in its beak. Harry and Ron, who were sitting opposite him, recognized the letter as a howler at once. Ron had got one from his mother the year before. "Run for it, Neville," Ron advised. Neville didn't need telling twice. He seized the envelope, and holding it before him like a bomb, sprinted out of the hall, while the Slytherin table exploded with laughter at the sight of him. They heard the howler go off in the entrance hall. Neville's grandmother's voice, magically magnified to 100 times its usual volume, shrieking about how he had brought shame on the whole family. This is a bit extreme, don't you think? Harry was too busy feeling sorry for Neville to notice immediately that he had a letter too. Hedwig got his attention by nipping him sharply on the wrist. Ouch! Oh, thanks, Hedwig. Harry tore open the envelope while Hedwig helped herself to some of Neville's cornflakes. The note inside said, Dear Harry and Ron, how about having tea with me this afternoon round 6? I'll come and collect you from the castle. Wait for me in the entrance hall. You're not allowed out on your own. Cheers, Hagrid. He probably wants to hear all about Black, said Ron. So at 6 o'clock that afternoon, Harry and Ron left Gryffindor Tower, passed the security trolls at a run, and headed down to the entrance hall. Hagrid was already waiting for them. All right, Hagrid, said Ron. Suppose you want to hear about Saturday night, do you? I've already heard all about it, said Hagrid, opening the front doors and leading them outside. Oh, said Ron, looking slightly put out. The first thing they saw on entering Hagrid's cabin was Buckbeak, who was stretched out on top of Hagrid's patchwork quilt, his enormous wings folded tight to his body, enjoying a large plate of dead ferrets. Averting his eyes from this unpleasant sight, Harry saw a gigantic hairy brown suit and a very horrible yellow and orange tie hanging from the top of Hagrid's wardrobe door. What are they for, Hagrid? Said Harry. Buckbeak's case against the committee for the disposal of dangerous creatures, said Hagrid. This Friday. Him and me'll be going down to London together. I booked 2 beds on the night bus. Harry felt a nasty pang of guilt. He had completely forgotten that Buckbeak's trial was so near, and judging by the uneasy look on Ron's face, he had too. They had also forgotten their promise about helping him prepare Buckbeak's defense. The arrival of the firebolt had driven it clean out of their minds. Hagrid poured them tea and offered them a plate of bath buns. But they knew better than to accept. They had had too much experience with Hagrid's cooking. I got something to discuss with you two, said Hagrid, sitting himself between them and looking uncharacteristically serious. What? Said Harry. Hermione, said Hagrid. What about her? Said Ron. She's in a right state, that's what. She's been coming down to visit me a lot since Christmas. Been feeling lonely. First you weren't talking to her because of the firebolt. Now you're not talking to her because of her cat. 8 scabbers! Ron interjected angrily. Because her cat acted like all cats do, Hagrid continued doggedly. She's cried a fair few times, you know. Going through a rough time at the moment. Been off more'n she can chew, if you ask me. All the work she's trying to do. Still found time to help me with Buckbeak's case, mind. She's found some really good stuff for me. Reckon he'll stand a good chance now. Hagrid, we should have helped as well. Sorry, Harry began awkwardly. I'm not blaming you, said Hagrid, waving Harry's apology aside. God knows you'd have enough to be getting on with. I've seen you practicing Quidditch every hour of the day and night. But I gotta tell you, I'd like you to value your friend more'n broomsticks and rats, that's all. Yeah, he's got a point. Harry and Ron exchanged uncomfortable looks. Really upset she was when Black nearly stabbed you, Ron. She's got her heart in the right place, Hermione has. And you two not talking to her. If she'd just get rid of that cat, I'd speak to her again, Ron said angrily. But she's still sticking up for it. It's a maniac, and she won't hear a word against it. Well, people can be a bit stupid about their pets, said Hagrid wisely. Yeah. Behind him, Buckbeak spat a few ferret bones onto Hagrid's pillow. Exactly. Jeez. They spent the rest of their visit discussing Gryffindor's improved chances for the Quidditch Cup. At 9 o'clock, Hagrid walked them back up to the castle. A large group of people were bunched around the bulletin board when they returned to the common room. Hogsmeade, next weekend, said Ron, craning over the heads to read the new notice. What do you reckon? He added quietly to Harry as they went to sit down. Well, Filch hasn't done anything about the passage to Honeydukes, Harry said, even more quietly. Harry, said a voice in his right ear. Harry started and looked around at Hermione, who was sitting at the table right behind them, and clearing a space in the wall of books that had been behind her. Harry, if you go into Hogsmeade again, I'll tell Professor McGonagall about that map, said Hermione. Can you hear someone talking, Harry? Jeez. growled Ron, not looking at Hermione. Ron, how can you let him go with you, after what Sirius Black nearly did to you? I mean it, I'll tell. So now you're trying to get Harry expelled, said Ron furiously. Haven't you done enough damage this year? Hermione opened her mouth to respond, but with a soft hiss, Crookshanks leapt onto her lap. Hermione took one frightened look at the expression on Ron's face, gathered up Crookshanks, and hurried away toward the girls' dormitories. So how about it? Ron said to Harry, as though there had been no interruption. Come on, last time we went, you didn't see anything. You haven't even been inside Zonko's yet. Harry looked around to check that Hermione was well out of earshot. Okay, he said, but I'm taking the invisibility cloak this time. Smart thinking. On Saturday morning, Harry packed his invisibility cloak in his bag, slipped the Marauder's map into his pocket, and went down to breakfast with everyone else. Hermione kept shooting suspicious looks down the table at him, but he avoided her eye, and was careful to let her see him walking back up the marble staircase in the entrance hall, as everyone else proceeded to the front doors. Bye, Harry called to Ron. See you when you get back. Ron grinned and winked. Harry hurried up to the third floor, slipping the Marauder's map out of his pocket as he went. Crouching behind the one-eyed witch, he smoothed it out. A tiny dot was moving in his direction. Harry squinted at it. The minuscule writing next to it read, Neville Longbottom. Harry quickly pulled out his wand, muttered, Descendium, and shoved his bag into the statue. But before he could climb in himself, Neville came around the corner. Harry, I forgot you weren't going to Hogsmeade either. Hi, Neville, said Harry, moving swiftly away from the statue and pushing the map back into his pocket. What are you up to? Nothing, shrugged Neville. Want a game of Exploding Snap? Not now. I was going to go to the library and do that vampire essay for Lupin. I'll come with you, Neville brightly. I haven't done it either. Neville, no. Hang on. Yeah, I forgot. I finished it last night. He's a terrible liar. Jeez, that was weird. Great, you can help me, said Neville, his round face anxious. I don't understand that thing about the garlic at all. Do they have to eat it, or... He broke off with a small gasp, looking over Harry's shoulder. It was Snape. Neville took a quick step behind Harry. And what are you two doing here? Said Snape, coming to a halt and looking from one to the other. An odd place to meet. To Harry's immense disquiet, Snape's black eyes flicked to the doorways on either side of them, and then to the one-eyed witch. We're not meeting here, said Harry. We just met here. Indeed, said Snape. You have a habit of turning up in unexpected places, Potter, and you are very rarely there for no good reason. I suggest the pair of you return to Gryffindor Tower, where you belong. Harry and Neville set off without another word. As they turned the corner, Harry looked back. Snape was running one of his hands over the one-eyed witch's head, examining it closely. Okay. Harry managed to shake Neville off at the fat lady by telling him the password, then pretending he'd left his vampire essay in the library and doubling back. Once out of sight of the security trolls, he pulled out the map again and held it close to his nose. The third-floor corridor seemed to be deserted. Harry scanned the map carefully and saw, with a leap of relief, that the tiny dot labeled Severus Snape was now back in its office. He sprinted back to the one-eyed witch, opened her hump, heaved himself inside, and slid down to meet his bag at the bottom of the stone chute. He wiped the Marauder's map blank again, then set off at a run. Harry, completely hidden beneath the invisibility cloak, emerged into the sunlight outside Honeyduke's and prodded Ron in the back. It's me, he muttered. What kept you? Ron hissed. Snape was hanging around. They set off up the high street. Where are you? Ron kept muttering out of the corner of his mouth. Are you still there? This feels weird. They went to the post office. Ron pretended to be checking the price of an owl to Bill in Egypt so that Harry could have a good look around. The owl sat hooting softly down at him. At least 300 of them. from great greys right down to tiny little Scops owls, local deliveries only, which were so small they could have sat in the palm of Harry's hand. Then they visited Zonko's, which was so packed with students Harry had to exercise great care not to tread on anyone and cause a panic. There were jokes and tricks to fulfill even Fred and George's wildest dreams. Harry gave Ron whispered orders and passed him some gold from under the cloak. They left Zonko's with their money bags considerably lighter than they had been on entering, but their pockets bulging with dung bombs, hiccup sweets, frog spawn soap, and a nose-biting teacup apiece. The day was fine and breezy, and neither of them felt like staying indoors, so they walked past the 3 broomsticks and climbed a slope to visit the Shrieking Shack, the most haunted dwelling in Britain. It stood a little way above the rest of the village, and even in daylight was slightly creepy, with its boarded windows and dank, overgrown garden. "Even the Hogwarts ghosts avoid it," said Ron as they leaned on the fence looking up at it. "Oh, they can travel outside of Hogwarts?" Didn't know that. I asked Nearly had this Nick. He says he's heard a very rough crowd lives here. No one can get in. Fred and George tried, obviously, but all the entrances are sealed shut. Harry, feeling hot from their climb, was just considering taking off the cloak for a few minutes when they heard voices nearby. Someone was climbing toward the house from the other side of the hill. Moments later, Malfoy had appeared, followed closely by Crabbe and Goyle. Malfoy was speaking. "Should have an owl from father any time now. He had to go to the hearing to tell them about my arm, about how I couldn't use it for 3 months. Crabbe and Goyle snickered. I really wish I could hear that great Harry moron trying to defend himself. There's no harm in him, honest. That hippogriff's as good as dead. Malfoy suddenly caught sight of Ron, his pale face split into a malevolent grin. "What are you doing, Weasley?" Malfoy looked up at the crumbling house behind Ron. "Suppose you'd love to live here, wouldn't you, Weasley? Dreaming about having your own bedroom? I had your family all sleep in one room. Is that true?" Harry seized the back of Ron's robe to stop him from leaping on Malfoy. "Leave him to me," he whispered in Ron's ear. I love this part. So fun. The opportunity was too perfect to miss. Harry crept silently behind Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle, bent down, and scooped a large handful of mud out of the path. "We were just discussing our friend Hagrid," Malfoy said to Ron. "Just trying to imagine what he's saying to the Committee for the Disposal of Dangerous Creatures. Do you think he'll cry when they cut off his hippogriffs? Splat!" Malfoy's head jerked forward as the mud hit him. His silver blonde hair was suddenly dripping in muck. "What the—" Ron had to hold onto the fence to keep himself standing. He was laughing so hard. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle spun stupidly on the spot, staring wildly around. Malfoy trying to wipe his hair clean. "What was that? Who did that?" "Very haunted up here, isn't it?" said Ron, with the air of one commenting on the weather. Crabbe and Goyle were looking scared. Their bulging muscles were no use against ghosts. Malfoy was staring madly around at the deserted landscape. Harry sneaked along the path, where a particularly sloppy puddle yielded some foul-smelling green sludge. Splatter! Crabbe and Goyle caught some this time. Goyle hopped furiously on the spot, trying to rub it out of his small, dull eyes. "It came from over there," said Malfoy, wiping his face and staring at a spot some 6 feet to the left of Harry. Crabbe blundered forward, his long arms outstretched like a zombie. Harry dodged around him, picked up a stick, and lobbed it at Crabbe's back. Harry doubled up with silent laughter as Crabbe did a kind of pirouette in midair, trying to see who had thrown it. As Ron was the only person Crabbe could see, it was Ron he started toward, but Harry stuck out his leg. Crabbe stumbled, and his huge flat foot caught the hem of Harry's cloak. Harry felt a great tug, then the cloak slid off his face. For a split second, Malfoy stared at him. "Ah!" he yelled, pointing at Harry's head. Then he turned tail and ran, at breakneck speed, back down the hill, Crabbe and Goyle behind him. Harry tugged the cloak up again, but the damage was done. "Harry," Ron said, stumbling forward and staring hopelessly at the point where Harry disappeared. "You'd better run for it. If Malfoy tells anyone, you'd better get back to the castle. Quick." "See you later," said Harry, and without another word he tore back down the path toward Hogsmeade. Would Malfoy believe what he had seen? Would anyone believe Malfoy? Nobody knew about the invisibility cloak. Nobody except Dumbledore. Harry's stomach turned over. Dumbledore would know exactly what had happened if Malfoy said anything. Back into Honeydukes, back down the cellar steps, across the stone floor through the trap door. Harry pulled off the cloak, tucked it under his arm, and ran, flat out, along the passage. Malfoy would get back first. How long would it take him to find a teacher? Panting, a sharp pain on his side, Harry didn't slow down until he reached the stone slide. He would have to leave the cloak where it was. It was too much of a giveaway in case Malfoy had tipped off a teacher. He hid it in a shadowy corner, then started to climb, fast as he could, his sweaty hands slipping on the sides of the chute. He reached the inside of the witch's hump, tapped it with his wand, stuck his head through, and hoisted himself out. The hump closed, and just as Harry jumped out from behind the statue, he heard quick footsteps approaching. It's like he knew. It was Snape. He approached Harry at a swift walk, his black robe swishing, then stopped in front of him. "So," he said. There was a look of suppressed triumph about him. Harry tried to look innocent, all too aware of his sweaty face and his muddy hands, which he quickly hid in his pockets. "Come with me, Potter," said Snape. Harry followed him downstairs, trying to wipe his hands clean on the inside of his robes without Snape noticing. They walked down the stairs to the dungeons and then into Snape's office. Harry had been in here only once before, and he had been in very serious trouble then, too. Snape had acquired a few more slimy, horrible things in jars since last time, all standing on shelves behind his desk, glinting in the firelight and adding to the threatening atmosphere. "Sit," said Snape. Harry sat. Snape, however, remained standing. "Mr. Malfoy has just been to see me with a strange story, Potter," said Snape. Harry didn't say anything. "He tells me that he was up by the Shrieking Shack when he ran into Weasley, apparently alone." Still, Harry didn't speak. "Mr. Malfoy states that he was standing talking to Weasley when a large amount of mud hit him in the back of the head. How do you think that could have happened?" Harry tried to look mildly surprised. "I don't know, Professor." Snape's eyes were boring into Harry's. It was exactly like trying to stare down a hippogriff. Harry tried hard not to blink. "Mr. Malfoy then saw an extraordinary apparition. Can you imagine what it might have been, Potter?" "No," said Harry, now trying to sound innocently curious. "It was your head, Potter, floating in mid-air." There was a long silence. "Maybe he'd better go to Madame Pomfrey," said Harry. "If he's seeing things like what would your head be doing in Hogsmeade, Potter?" said Snape softly. "Your head is not allowed in Hogsmeade. No part of your body has permission to be in Hogsmeade." "I know that," said Harry, striving to keep his face free of guilt or fear. "It sounds like Malfoy is not having hallucinations," snarled Snape, and he bent down, a hand on each arm of Harry's chair, so that their faces were a foot apart. "If your head was in Hogsmeade, so was the rest of you." "I've been up in Gryffindor Tower," said Harry. "Like you told. Can anyone confirm that?" Harry didn't say anything. Snape's thin mouth curled into a horrible smile. "So," he said, straightening up again, "everyone from the Minister of Magic downward has been trying to keep famous Harry Potter safe from Sirius Black. But famous Harry Potter is a law unto himself. Let the ordinary people worry about his safety. Famous Harry Potter goes where he wants to, with no thought for the consequences." Harry stayed silent. Snape was trying to provoke him into telling the truth. He wasn't going to do it. Snape had no proof. Yet. "How extraordinarily like your father you are, Potter," Snape said suddenly, his eyes glinting. He, too, was exceedingly arrogant. A small amount of talent in the Quidditch field made him think he was a cut above the rest of us, too, strutting around the place with his friends and admirers. The resemblance between you is uncanny. My dad didn't strut, said Harry before he could stop himself, and neither do I. Your father didn't set much store by the rules either, Snape went on, pressing his advantage, his thin face full of malice. Rules were for lesser mortals, not Quidditch Cup winners. His head was so swollen. Shut up! Harry was suddenly on his feet. Rage, such as he had not felt since his last night in Privet Drive, was coursing through him. He didn't care that Snape's face had gone rigid, the black eyes flashing dangerously. What did you say to me, Potter? I told you to shut up about my dad, Harry yelled. I know the truth, all right. He saved your life. Dumbledore told me. You wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for my dad. Snape's sallow skin had gone the color of sour milk. And did the headmaster tell you the circumstances in which your father saved my life? He whispered. Or did he consider the details too unpleasant for precious Potter's delicate ears? Harry bit his lip. He didn't know what had happened and didn't want to admit it, but Snape seemed to have guessed the truth. I would hate for you to run away with a false idea of your father, Potter, he said, a terrible grin twisting his face. Have you been imagining some act of glorious heroism? Then let me correct you. Your saintly father and his friends played a highly amusing joke on me that would have resulted in my death if your father hadn't got cold feet at the last moment. There was nothing brave about what he did. He was saving his own skin as much as mine. Had their joke succeeded, he would have been expelled from Hogwarts. Snape's uneven yellowish teeth were bared. Turn out your pockets, Potter. He spat suddenly. Harry didn't move. There was a pounding in his ears. Turn out your pockets, or we go straight to the headmaster. Pull them out, Potter. Cold with dread, Harry slowly pulled out the bag of Zonko's tricks and the Marauder's map. Snape picked up the Zonko's bag. Ron gave them to me, said Harry, praying he'd get a chance to tip Ron off before Snape saw him. He brought them back from Hogsmeade last time. Indeed. And you've been carrying them around ever since. How very touching. And what is this? Snape had picked up the map. Harry tried with all his might to keep his face impassive. It's a bit of parchment, he said with a shrug. Snape turned it over, his eyes on Harry. Surely you don't need such a very old piece of parchment, he said. Why don't I just throw this away? Ooh, that's good. Ooh, Snape is too good! His hand moved toward the fire. No, said Harry quickly. So, said Snape, his long nostrils quivering, is this another treasured gift from Mr. Weasley? Or is it something else? A letter, perhaps, written in invisible ink? Or instructions to get into Hogsmeade without passing the Dementors? Harry blinked. Snape's eyes gleamed. Let me see. He muttered, taking out his wand and smoothing the map out on his desk. Reveal your secret, he said, touching the wand to the parchment. Nothing happened. Harry clutched his hands to stop them from shaking. Show yourself, Snape said, tapping the map sharply. It stayed blank. Harry was taking deep, calming breaths. Professor Severus Snape, master of this school, commands you to yield the information you conceal, Snape said, hitting the map with his wand. As though an invisible hand was writing upon it, words appeared on the smooth surface of the map. Mr. Mooney presents his compliments to Professor Snape and begs him to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business. Snape froze. Harry stared, dumbstruck at the message, but the map didn't stop there. More writing was appearing beneath the first. Mr. Prongs agrees with Mr. Mooney and would like to add that Professor Snape is an ugly git. It would have been very funny if the situation hadn't been so serious. And there was more. Mr. Padfoot would like to register his astonishment that an idiot like that ever became a professor. Harry closed his eyes in horror. When he'd opened them, the map had its last word. Mr. Wormtail bids Professor Snape good day and advises him to wash his hair, the slime ball. Harry waited for the blow to fall. So, said Snape softly, we'll see about this. He strode across to his fire, seized a fistful of glittering powder from a jar on the fireplace, and threw it into the flames. Lupin, Snape called into the fire, I want a word. That is weird that he called Lupin, but... Utterly bewildered, Harry stared at the fire. A large shape had appeared in it, revolving very fast. Seconds later, Professor Lupin was clambering out of the fireplace, brushing ash off his shabby robes. You called, Severus, said Lupin mildly. I certainly did, said Snape, his face contorted with fury as he strode back to his desk. I've just asked Potter to empty his pockets. He was carrying this. Snape pointed at the parchment, on which the words of Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs were still shining. An odd, closed expression appeared on Lupin's face. He knows exactly what that is. Oh, how did you come by this? Well, said Snape. Lupin continued to stare at the map. Harry had the impression that Lupin was doing some very quick thinking. Well, said Snape again, this parchment is plainly full of dark magic. This is supposed to be your area of expertise, Lupin. What do you imagine Potter got such a thing? Lupin looked up and, by the merest half-glance in Harry's direction, warned him not to interrupt. Full of dark magic, he repeated mildly. Do you really think so, Severus? It looks to me as though it is merely a piece of parchment that insults anybody who reads it. Childish, but surely not dangerous. I imagine Harry got it from a joke shop. Indeed, said Snape. His jaw had gone rigid with anger. You think a joke shop could supply him with such a thing? You don't think it more likely that he got it directly from the manufacturers? Does Snape know what it is? That would be why he called Lupin. Harry didn't understand what Snape was talking about. Nor apparently did Lupin. You mean by Mr. Wormtail, or one of these people? He said. Harry, do you know any of these men? No, said Harry quickly. Actually, you do. You just don't know it. You see, Severus, said Lupin, turning back to Snape, it looks like a Zonko product to me. Right on cue, Ron came bursting into the office. Good old Ron. Buddy! He was completely out of breath and stopped just short of Snape's desk, clutching the stitch in his chest and trying to speak. Although this is kind of giving it away, but I appreciate his loyalty. I appreciate what he's trying to do. I gave Harry that stuff, he choked. Bought it in Zonko's ages ago. Well, said Lupin, clapping his hands together and looking around cheerfully, that seems to clear that up. Severus, I'll take this back, shall I? He folded the map and tucked it inside his robes. Harry, Ron, come with me. I need a word about my vampire essay. Excuse us, Severus. Harry didn't dare look at Snape as they left his office. He, Ron, and Lupin walked all the way back into the entrance hall before speaking. Then Harry turned to Lupin. Professor, I don't want to hear explanations, said Lupin shortly. He glanced around the entrance hall and lowered his voice. I happen to know that this map was confiscated by Mr. Filch many years ago. Yes, I know it's a map, he said as Harry and Ron looked amazed. I don't want to know how it fell into your possession. I am, however, astounded that you didn't hand it in, particularly after what happened the last time a student left information about the castle lying around. And I can't let you have it back, Harry. Harry had expected that, and was too keen for explanations to protest. Why did Snape think I got it from the manufacturers? Because, Lupin hesitated. Because these map makers would have wanted to lure you out of the school. They'd think it extremely entertaining. Do you know them? Said Harry, impressed. Maybe. We've met, he said shortly. That's putting it mildly. He was looking at Harry more seriously than ever before. Don't expect me to cover up for you again, Harry. I cannot make you take Sirius Black seriously. But I would have thought that what you have heard when the Dementors drawn near you would have had more of an effect on you. Your parents gave their lives to keep you alive, Harry. A poor way to repay them, gambling the sacrifice for a bag of magic tricks. Yeah, that'll do it. He walked away, leaving Harry feeling worse by far than he had at any point in Snape's office. Slowly, he and Ron mounted the marble staircase. As Harry passed the one-eyed witch, he remembered the invisibility cloak. It was still down there, but he didn't dare go and get it. It's my fault, said Ron abruptly. I persuaded you to go. Lupin's right. It was stupid. We shouldn't have done it. He broke off. They reached the corridor where the security trolls were pacing, and Hermione was walking toward them. One look at her face convinced Harry that she had heard what had happened. His heart plummeted. Had she told Professor McGonagall? Come to have a good gloat, said Ron savagely as she stopped in front of them. Or have you just been to tell on us? No, said Hermione. She was holding a letter in her hands, and her lip was trembling. I just thought you ought to know. Hagrid lost his case. Buckbeak is going to be executed. But that is the end of chapter 14. We are almost done. Alright, next week we will read chapter 15, the Quidditch Final. And then chapter 16, Professor Trelawney's prediction. The beginning of the end. Or the beginning of the beginning of the end. Anyway. Pretty exciting. But that is it. I hope you enjoyed. I certainly did. Thank you so much for watching. Please feel free to leave comments in the comment section down below. And leave a like on the stream as well. It really helps me out. Really want to get more viewers, more eyeballs on the videos so I can have more members on the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, click subscribe and click the bell icon so you can be notified the next time I upload and when I stream. I'll be streaming next week probably, Friday and Saturday at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Friday I'll be playing Halo, and Saturday I'll be reading more Harry Potter. And if you'd like to know more about my schedules and when they happen, or general information about me, because I post general stuff every once in a while, follow me on Twitter, link in the description. And I think that's it. So, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a magical evening. Bye-bye.